We're going to talk about the Oneida migration from New York to Wisconsin, and Josh is, I guess you could say he's my understudy or something like that, because he's going to be carrying this out when I'm gone. 1 week, huh? 1 week, and the other week you have something else going on.
Spring break.
Spring break. Oh, he wouldn't want to be here then, and neither would you. So. Okay, we can just put yeah. Familiar? This picture is probably familiar to you. This is right down the middle of New York, and the larger white piece represents 6 million acres. The Oneida's original territory from St. Lawrence River down to the Pennsylvania border. So then in 1785, the governor wanted a piece of land down there by the Pennsylvania border, and that was before the Constitution, because the Constitution of the United States is 1789. So on the states had more leverage, more authority before the Constitution than after. And so there's 300,000 down there along the border in the blue part. And then in 1788, that's also before the Constitution, that the Oneidas worked out an agreement with New York, but their understanding was that it was leased. 6 million acres was leased and not ceded or granted to the state of New York. And that's what we were battling about for the last 200 years. And I guess we're still battling because it hasn't been settled. And the court case that was recently, the court case said they were not, the Supreme Court said they were not going to accept the appeal, they call it certiorari. They weren't going to do that, so it left it back with the decision of the Second Circuit. Second Circuit said we lost all our rights. They said, well, we sat on our hands too long, which means we didn't bring the case in time. I think it's all wrong. I'm not an attorney and I'm not a justice, but I think they have made a major mistake. And the major mistake is that we did not sit on our hands too long. We have all kinds of documents over the last 200 years where the chiefs went to Albany and went to New York fighting for the land rights over 200 years. So they weren't just ignoring the situation, they were paying attention to it. Oh, we got a rat pack here. Yeah. Jedidiah Morse, Indian subagent, his subagent was Jasper Parrish. Eleazer Williams was Mohawk and English. His grandmother, I think it was grandmother or great-grandmother, was Eunice Williams. She was captured when she was a child in Deerfield, Massachusetts, and brought up through the snow, about 300 miles, through the deep snow, up to in the area of Akwesasne and Dunwanke, and they carried her. The mother, her mother, Eunice Williams' mother was killed, and she had a brand new baby, and that baby was killed too because they couldn't deal with that. So they would take the people that were strong and take them. It was a big political thing. I think maybe you should know how this works. There was a guy that was captured during the French and Indian War, all those altercations with the French. And I think his name was Jean-Baptiste. He was kept as a prisoner in Boston. So what they wanted the Mohawks to do is to go down and capture some high-profile political people to exchange for their prisoners, John Duffy. So that they headed for Deerfield, and they captured a lot of people in Deerfield. Almost all of them were evangelist preachers. Nearly everybody, and John Williams was also. And her brothers were captured too, and all of those, the brothers were released. Ultimately, they were shifting around, traveling from one place to another, and they finally caught up with all of them. And I think her father was released, and her brothers were released. She never got released, and then she was invited to come down to Deerfield and see her family, and they were desperate because they weren't worried about her physical well-being. They were worried about her spiritual well-being. She was going straight to hell if she did not, straighten out and come back and accept, the evangelism that they were preaching on the day. And that's what they were worried about. But she came down, and I think they said she stayed a couple of weeks in the apple orchard, camped there. She wasn't going in the house. And her father asked her if she was going to stay, and all she said was, maybe not. And maybe not. She just packed up and went back to 300 miles north of the area. And that's Eleazer Williams, is from her family. He was raised Catholic, but it didn't seem to make too much difference to him because he just jumped over and went with the Episcopal Church. And I think he talked to one of the bishops, Bishop Hobart maybe, and the bishop assigned him to the Oneidas. He said, "You may be the catechist for the Oneidas." He wasn't a priest. He was more like a lay minister. And he talked the bishop into this, and so his scheme was to get not only the Oneidas, but all the others of the Six Nations as well, to move to the country in the West. And he had already talked to the Menominee, and the Menominee had a lot of land here, 8 million acres, all the way from, I think I showed you that map before, all the way down from Milwaukee, all the way up to Big Enough. And the Menominee agreed that we could go out there and settle on their lands, but it was a different story when everybody got there. There was a big political hassle about whether or not the New York Indians could come here, and the Menominee themselves were unsettled because they said that the chiefs that should have been there to approve this were not present, so there were incorrect people signing the treaty with the New York Indians. And then the descendants of the French fur traders who had married Menominee ladies were in that fray too, because they wanted, they didn't want any land to be given to the New York Indians. They would like to have part of that for themselves. So that was that. And then John C. Calhoun here, he was next. Everything in South Carolina is named Calhoun. There's a Calhoun School, a Calhoun Falls, John C. this, and everywhere you go, it's John C. Calhoun. And I think he was the Secretary of War, but he also was in the Senate, and he did some other things. But he also had a plantation and slaves. So he had all this stuff going for him. And he was in the picture because he was a Secretary of War during that time. Indian affairs were in the Department of War, not the Department of Interior. But we were still fighting Indians. We, not me, the United States, was still fighting Indians out on the plains for another 40 years, 50 years almost. Still fighting Indians. So it's in the Department of War. So he was the Secretary of War, and David Ogden and the Ogden Land Company from New York, they were tied in with the governor, tied in with the big politicians from New York, paid huge sums of money to have preemption rights, not only on Oneida land, but on the other land from Seneca and Cayuga and all the rest of them. And so did the Holland Land Company, these two big land companies. And they paid to the United States 3 cents an acre to have first rights of refusal. In other words, the United States, after that deal, would not be able to sell it to anybody except to that person who bought those preemption rights. So they got their hands on all of it, the whole state of New York. Jedidiah Morse, he came out here, Geography Made Easy, I don't know about this, printed in 22 editions in 1820. 4 other publications by 1802, Calvinist, pastor, and missionary. Calvinist means a Protestant missionary, something in the Puritan line, because anybody that was Puritan when they left England, they didn't like the Catholic Church for certain. But then when they got to England, they had the Holy Apostles. Well, it was the Episcopalian Church, not the Holy Apostles. Ours is the Holy Apostles. The Episcopalian Church, and the Episcopalian Church was the same as the Catholic Church, except that it mostly was in English and not in Latin. So the Puritans didn't like that, and the Calvinists and the Methodists, well, I think they're in the Methodists too, Presbyterians, all of those folks did not want to have anything to do with the English church. That's why they left England, come over to here, to have freedom of religion. After you got here, they didn't let anybody have freedom of religion. So, but they came here because they wanted to have freedom of religion. Illuminati Conspiracy, 1798-99. I watched that, but I don't know a whole lot about it. The Illuminati Conspiracy. And I think it had something to do with, the Crusaders. The Crusaders, you know, they were in the Inquisition. They were all killed. If the Catholic Church could get their hands on them. They were all Catholic monks in the first place, and they went down to save Jerusalem about 3 or 4 times, all the way from England and the other countries, and they went on their horses all the way to Jerusalem to save the city, but they became very wealthy. And so the French king and his followers did not like the idea that they were getting very wealthy and they were Catholic. And so what they did was get to the Pope, and the Pope could put out an edict that said they will all be killed. Get them, torture them, all be killed. And they did. Well, they think they did. Because they think that there are still some descendants of those people yet today in Scotland, where I'm going, and some other places. They think there are some descendants that went underground, hid their documents in these medieval churches and things, and are still operating. They also think that they have something to do with Masons. There's a lot that goes on big stories that go on the History Channel about the Masons, and they think there's a tie between the Crusaders and the Masons as well. And Eleazer Williams was a Mason. I think, 32nd degree Mason is as high as you can get. But I think you have to stop and look at his headstone. It's right by the stone church down there. I think it says 33rd degree Mason. But if you knew Eleazer Williams and read about him, that doesn't surprise anybody. And then he would be, you know, the highest of the high of the high. You know, that. Okay. Where are we now? A new map of North America in a new map in 1797 says, showing of the new discoveries. They had a pretty, if that's 1797, they had a pretty accurate map of the northern continent here. And they didn't have all the tribes listed because right now there are 566 tribes. Well, there's not nearly that many there, but they had the eastern ones all listed pretty much. And the eastern ones suffered the smallpox epidemics, any other epidemic that came along with it, because all of those diseases, about a half a dozen of them, were not on this continent until the immigrants brought them here. And it would be measles and scarlet fever and tuberculosis and smallpox and other pox. So there were all of those diseases that were brought here. And there's a book out, a coffee table book that was put out by the Smithsonian that called The Seeds of Change, which was done in 1976. And in that, it talks not only about seeds as we know them, like beans and corn and whatever, potatoes, whatever we exchange, but also the bacteria that was brought here also was in that book. It's called The Seeds of Change, 1976. Here he is. I don't know what that means. I didn't write this, but this is political oscillator. I think it means political vacillator. I don't know. But anyway, cast iron man, created the Bureau of Indian Affairs in 1924, but it was in the War Department. Supplied funding to Oneida group to travel west and negotiate with the Menominee. And supporter of the Oneida Iroquois removal. Everybody was a supporter of the removal. That's the whole state of New York that they wanted. And they pretty much got it too. So far. Jasper Parrish, 1767 to 1836. Lived with his family at the head of the Delaware River in New York State. 1778, at age 11, captured by Muncie and later traded to Mohawk chief David Hill. The Muncie are the
Aftercare, please send Ari Musso to the office. Ari Musso, please come to the office.
The Muncie are part of the Stockbridge Muncie, but there are also some Muncie that live across the Thames River in Ontario, Canada. And there are Muncie that still live back in Delaware and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I think we stopped in an area, didn't we? In Pennsylvania, someplace to the Muncie River. Yeah, I remember that. And then Oklahoma. There are some that migrated to Oklahoma too. So they're split up all over the place. 1784 Treaty of Fort Stanwix, returned as prisoner of war. He was traded. That's what was in the early treaties, that people were traded during the treaty making. If there were two parties making a treaty, and they said, well, we're not going to settle with you unless you return all your prisoners, and your prisoners belong to our tribe. So then, if you want to solidify this treaty, and that's what you have to do. Sometimes 6 prisoners were exchanged, and that was good because they were still living. And a lot of them never made it through, whatever was going to be going on in the villages and stuff. That a lot of them did not live. 1790. This Jasper Parrish was an interpreter for the U.S. He probably knew all the languages, all the Iroquois languages, which would be 6 of them. And he may have known other languages too, because the languages from, say, the Pequots and the Narragansetts and all those people are Algonquin, and the Menominee language is Algonquin as well, and the Ojibwe language is Algonquin. So he may have also known those languages. And then Pickering Treaty, 1794, Treaty of Canandaigua. That's going to be celebrated again this year on, it is every year on November 11th. That's when it was signed, 1794, November 11th. I was there at the 200 years anniversary in 1994. And then Ada Deer was there. She was the Undersecretary of Interior, and she gave bolts of cloth out at that time, because it's also called the Calico Treaty, because of the cloth haven't been given out. I got to see, I've got to think of his name now. First of all, Joan Rivers. What does she have to do with anything, you know? She lives in a very, very fancy apartment on Park Avenue. And she had a reception for Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Senator from New York. Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And I was there to talk about land claims. So the first thing I said to him was, about the Treaty of Canandaigua. And he said, yes, he said, Timothy Pickering. And he knew the whole thing. He could recite this by heart. This senator, and he was a historian, and he knew what this was all about. Unfortunately, Daniel Patrick Moynihan passed away. So he was one of our big helpers. And Joan Rivers was just there supplying him with some scotch or something while we were there. That was her role. Eleazer, this is his picture. It says 1787 because I guess no one really knows his exact birthday. He died in Akwesasne in 1858. And then I met a former chairman of the Mohawk Nation. They got several chairmen. His name is Philip Tarbell. And I saw him someplace while I was traveling around up there through New York. And I said, Philip, I haven't seen you for the longest time. I said, Eleazer Williams is buried in our churchyard. He said, maybe. I said, well, what's up with that? Well, he said, when we were kids, and they had these headstones, he said, boys, about 12, 15, we switched the headstones around. So maybe the person that was exhumed is Eleazer, and maybe it isn't. So they did that, those boys. In the war, he was in the War of 1812, and we're doing a big, what do you call it now? Graphic novel. It's a comic book, but they call it a graphic novel. It's 100 pages long, and it's all about the Oneidas in the War of 1812. They saved, again, the 13 colonies at Sackett's Harbor in Lake, Ontario, in June of 1814, and that was part of the war. That just about wrapped up the War of 1812, because that was the last big battle, and the Oneidas in their little rowboats and stuff beat the British Army, beat the British Navy with all of their cannons and their boats and everything else, and we beat them. And the war turned in favor of the 13 colonies against Britain. So we're writing this comic book, also called a graphic novel, and from that will be a full feature film that people can go see in wherever you watch feature films. I don't go there. So that's where it will be. The Lost Dauphin, this is what he called himself. You know who the Lost Dauphin is? Anybody? Yeah? The French, supposedly the heir to the throne of France. And he said he was the heir to the throne of France. He lied. He lied about everything. But everybody, at the time he was living and he wrote these letters and stuff, everybody believed him. We're just now finding out that everything he did was a lie. So, so I don't know. They did a movie, and MGM did a movie about called Lazar, I think, for Lazarus, or not Lazarus, but Eleazer, but they called him Lazar. And there was also some kind of a play in Green Bay at a theater, and it was for him, to honor him as a lost Dauphin, and it was you couldn't get in. They said there was standing room only, and it was a big deal. And he did this, but do you know, you see, go down double E and it says, I think it says Lost Dauphin Road, or Williams Grant Road, Williams Grant. Well, that road, that Williams Grant, that wasn't his. That was his wife's. Because she was Menominee, and she was a schoolgirl, like 13 or 14. And she went home in the evening, and her sister said, well, you're going to have to get ready because you're going to get married. So Eleazer Williams was quite a bit older than her, and he made some kind of a deal with her father so that he could marry her. And when she got 4,000 acres along a river over in the town of Lawrence, because of the way everybody handled those affairs then, that it quickly turned over to him. So it was called Williams Grant Road. And it wasn't his land at all, it was his wife's. When he went back to Akwesasne in New York, she did not go. She did not go with him.
Are the Williams that are Oneida, are they related?
I don't really think so. But I'm trying to find, somebody just asked me today about Chester Williams, and Matilda Williams, Well, I knew Chester. I didn't know Matilda. They called her Tilly. I didn't know her, but I knew Chester quite well. And somebody just asked me that. That is Karina's grandfather and grandmother. Karina Rosinski is her name. Yeah, Rosinski, yeah. Okay, there's a lot of stuffs here based on the Lost Dauphin, and the whole thing is a big lie. He's not a Lost Dauphin, and people here believed him. Even those big guys in Washington, Calhoun and all of them, they believed him too. He was pretty sharp guy about telling all this stuff. Entire territory of Wisconsin as established by the Act of Congress. Well, I don't know what, they got Dakota over there, but over in the middle, right next to Lake Michigan, and they got Upper Michigan there. That's out of whack. That map is not correct. But they have all of Wisconsin there, with that little purple. They got the Chippewas in the top there, and then I don't know if they got the other tribes or not. But there were about 5 or 6 tribes here. They got the Winnebagos over near the Minnesota border. The Oneidas came here in 1823, and the state Wisconsin became a state in 1848. The reason that and all the tribes lost all their land during that time. All of it here. Because with there's just a few little pieces, but basically the whole state Reason was, you gotta have, how many people do you have to have for a congressman? 30,000 or 50,000? Something like that. One or the other. About 30? But you have to have about 30,000 voters. Well, they had lots of Indians here, but they weren't voters. So they had to get their land so that the immigrants could move in and they would be voters then, so they could elect 2 senators and congressmen. That's why they had to have all that land. And they did. The original 13 colonies held claim to land west of the Appalachian Mountains. That's right. They drew their lines all the way from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. Massachusetts did, Massachusetts, Bay Colony, and the rest of them. There's North Carolina. There's claimed by Massachusetts, that top line there, and claimed by Connecticut on this side of Pennsylvania. And down on the Ohio River, it's claimed by New York, and up in Wisconsin is claimed by Virginia until 1784. So we could have been Virginian planters or something, I don't know. So that's it. 1609, the Virginia Charter down here, but that's South Carolina where that says it, and then South Carolina and North Carolina. I'm still trying to figure out the burial ground in South Carolina. There's a burial ground there on my brother's property, and I did have some discussion with an archaeologist from South Carolina last week, and he was interested in it. I hope he keeps interested in it because we want to find out exactly what those burials and who those burials are. My brother said there were 51 burials there and 2 mass grave sites on his property, but nobody has identified them. I talked to the state archaeologist. His name is Jonathan Leader. And Jonathan was there. He got out of his car. He wasn't there 10 minutes, and he looked this way at the burial where my brother said there were 51 burials. He said, yes, I will write you a letter certifying that this is a burial. So he did. He did do that. The original 13 colonies held claim to land west of the Appalachian Mountains. Claim relinquished in 1784. Ordinance of 1784, Thomas Jefferson. Michigan State was under British control until 1796, although June 20th, 1790, Knox County was established. I think a lot of that British control went on until the War of 1812. That's what it was all about. Britain still had all kinds of forts, like down by Detroit, on the west end of New York State, over in Michigan. They still held on to those after the Revolutionary War. So that's what the war was all about. Get Britain out of there. And then they were impressing young men from the colonies. That means that they would kidnap them and take them out to sea and have them do duty on their British ships. And for years they'd be gone. 2, 3, 4 years, and they'd be kidnapped off the colonies. Britain was looking for extra manpower, so that's how they got it. Michigan Territory, Indian Territory, Illinois Territory, and Wisconsin Territory. They're all territories until they are formally accepted into Congress and then voted into Congress. And then it says, what is wrong with this story? Like I said, I didn't write this, but I think it could be quite a bit wrong with it. Major area, but they shifted around, over time. In the Dakota Sioux, they moved all the way out of the state, and most of them moved way across Minnesota over to Flanders, the Santee Sioux. and other tribes move over to South and North Dakota, but there are probably 3 Dakota tribes in Minnesota. There's one by right along in the Mississippi River, Prairie Island, and then there's Metoxen, and then I think there's another Sioux organization in Minnesota. Yeah, Shakopee. And then Ho-Chunk, they don't have, see, they got the Ojibwe and Potawatomi up there, but they had the 4 fires, I think, were Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Menominee, and Ottawa. 4 fires. They say Ottawa. Those 4 were, and they were here. In the Ho-Chunk, see, the Potawatomi were all the way down to Milwaukee. This map does not show that. That's why they have a big casino in Milwaukee, because they could prove that was originally their land.
What a fox up here?
The fox, Sac and Fox, they came on the south, through Illinois, because what's his name? The Sac and Fox leader? I wanted to say Black Elk, that's not his name. Black Hawk. Why did you get that? Black Hawk. Black Hawk, some of his leaders, they gave up their big corn planting land and stuff along the Rock River in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. And he opposed that, and he had certain followers that they wanted to fight for their land. And they did. And then some of the other tribes were on the other side. Like the Ho-Chunk were on the other side. And might have been some Potawatomis too. And that were on the other side. But yeah, Black Hawk. And everybody, most historians look at Black Hawk today and say he was a real great leader in everything. And then it was a different story. Okay, original inhabitants of the area that is now Wisconsin are the Dakota Sioux, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Ojibwe tribe. There are 6 reservations in Wisconsin: Sakaugan, Red Cliff, Bad River, St. Croix, the Coudray, the Vieux-Desert. I think they're on the other side in the Michigan territory, but they belong to the Wisconsin area. The Potawatomi and the Fox and Sauk. Outagamie means fox. That's what the name is. Other Indian tribes driven into Wisconsin after Europeans' arrival included the Cheyenne, Huron, Illini, Munsee, Stockbridge, Oneida, Brothertown, and many more. Well, that law of 1830 that was promoted by President Jackson said that all of the Indians east of the Mississippi were to be removed to west of the Mississippi. Well, Wisconsin is not quite west of the Mississippi, but a lot of tribes got removed over here. But there were people, both politicians in Washington, politicians from Wisconsin, and people who came here, farmers from other countries, wanted the Oneidas and Stockbridge and Brotherton to remove from the state. There are letters that say that are written by people that said, get them out of here. And then there were certain leaders of the Oneida. I think Chief Cornelius Hill was one of them. Daniel Bragg was another one, who said, we are not going any further. You are blowing us around like a feather in the wind. We don't know where we're going to land tomorrow, and we're not going. So like, hell no, we won't go. So they're not going. Okay. Well, here's the big culprit, the biggest culprit of them all. A lot of people still think he is, somebody could be emulated and all of that, but I think he was a crook and a liar. So that's my assessment of him. And here's the path we took, and you've seen this before. You know, coming from New York through the lakes. That took about 3 weeks to get from Buffalo over to Green Bay area. And then there's a little hook on there that where the people went to the Thames. I think that needs to be up further. That's by Port Stanley. And there were a number of people that pooled their money and they bought 5,000 acres along the Thames River. And they still have it. This is Walk in the Water. The Indians named that because they never saw a boat that could move without somebody rowing it. So they called it Walk in the Water. Yeah, steamship. And that's where we settled. The 3 parts on right of Lake Winnebago, two of them belong to the Stockbridge and one to the Brotherton. That one in the lower end belonged to the Brotherton. That's what they settled on in the Treaty of 1822. And it says Grand Conklin. That's where some of the Oneidas were in 1824 to 1832. That's an explosion of the map up on top there. So that's how much land they had. The Stockbridge had 1 township, which is over 24,000 acres, and the Brotherton had a half a township. Or they had 1 township. Brotherton had 2, I think. So they must have. They had 2 townships. They had 48,000. Township is 24,000 acres. Oh, I drew this map. This is all the Menominee land in the green, and in the rust color was when it was reduced in 1831, and then in 1838 reduced to the purple, and then further reduced by the Dawes Allotment Act. So by 1929 we had a couple hundred acres left of tribal. That was still in trust by 1929.
The green was the original Oneida?
Well, yeah. We signed a treaty with the Menominees in 1822, and we shared their 8 million acres with them. But that was the big politics of the time. Those folks who said the real chiefs did not sign that, and then those descendants of the French fur traders who got into the mix also. And they were raising hell in Washington. And so Washington sent out Colonel Stoneball and said, settle it. Get it done. So he worked on it and got that 500,000 acres in 1831. In 1832, he was off fighting in the Second Fox War. I think both Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln were here in the Second Fox War also. Both of them.
Aftercare, please send Caleb LaRock to the office. Mom will pick him up.
This is a house that was still standing when I was a kid, and people still lived in houses like this. We lived in a log house, but it was covered with siding, so you didn't even know if it was a log house or not. We did. Our family lived in a log house also, like that, but it was covered with siding. Two main churches. I don't think you can see the headstone over there yet because Eleazer Williams was moved back here from Akwesasne in 1947. They both burned. They were both struck by lightning. The Methodist church on the left was struck by lightning in June of 1943, burned to the ground. And no papers burned in it. Everybody says, well, they lost the papers. No, they didn't. They got stuff out. They got a lot of stuff out. And then the other one was struck by lightning in 1917 and was rebuilt by 1921. That's Nelson Metoxen's blacksmith shop. And I think that house right up on the left is that bar. What do they call that bar in Oneida? Harley something or another? I don't know.
Harley Bob's.
Huh?
Harley Bob's.
Harley Bob? I think that building right there is Harley Bob's. And Nelson Metoxen built it. In Oneida. This is all in Oneida. That one on the bottom is Joseph Smith's. And Joseph Smith had a sawmill, a cheese factory, a grocery store, a blacksmith shop, and some other stuff, all on that property, and it's all where Julie Barton lives now. Mm-hmm. And this is Old Salt Fork Avenue. And I think that house on the other side, I do more research on. This is strawberries up here. That house way over the hill there. There was a family named Sebastian there, and Sebastian used to make moonshine down along Bread Creek, which is now Silver Creek. And Karina and I went and found the foundation of that. But Mrs. Sebastian was very mean to her husband, and she was about 4 times bigger than he was. And she was mean to him, and then one day Hudson told me they were playing ball down on this end, and kids were not supposed to go up there. And why is because Mr. Sebastian killed her and chopped her up and put her in a tub. Yes, right there. That is true. But I gotta look in the paper because I think it's in like 1920 or 21.
Is that Dockster House? Is that one?
I don't think it's the same house. No, but it's in the same place. See, you don't see a tree on this side of the road. And there's all full of trees there, and there used to be some houses on the left side. Yeah, I think that log house in the middle was Vincent Reed's. Yeah, Vincent. And I think the one on this side was Jacob Skenador with that little porch on it. Mm-hmm.
Oh, end of slideshow.
End of story. Thank you very much. I'll see you when I get back. Yo. I will do that. I got people looking after me. I gotta go down and go around and keep getting that. I'm going to wait.